Oh, okay.
I'm being sarcastic.
Oh, okay. I'm new here, Joseph. I don't know.
No. I am being sarcastic.
Okay, got
Or
it.
as my wife likes to say, too ironic. So I learned last week, Alessandra is always teaching me that Zoom has a cutoff for loud sounds in front of the mic. That's why you couldn't hear the shofar. So I'm going to turn my computer and go across the room. Okay? And let's see if I can fulfill the mitzvah of shofar for you from a few days. I'm afraid you've been missing. I'll wait for a few more people to come.
What am I missing?
I like that title.
Hi, Iom. Janete, hello.
Hello. Long time no see.
Yes.
I saw her
Yes.
yesterday.
Yeah.
I saw her yesterday.
A good
He's
thing
blowing.
yesterday.
He's blowing the shofar.
Could you hear it this week?
Yeah,
No.
More than last week, yes.
More than last week.
a little
Thanks,
bit.
Zoom.
Just a,
So tonight is the last of the 3 sessions. And we will be doing David and Esther, difficult characters, much more complex than Abraham, Rachel, Miriam, and Moses. I love being a member of Ari. I love saying I have a congregation that I belong to. But I give to my congregation. One of my bosses is on the tele, Sergio. Whenever he calls, I say yes, no matter what he's asking. He wants a commentario, and no
That's
matter
true,
what
that's
he
true.
needs it, I do it. There's one more thing I'm going to give. I donate these classes. We donate the books, my books, for Ari, the betterment of Ari. And Alessandra asked if I would ask you who've participated in this course to donate a new Plaut Chumash, a new Plaut Chumash. Would you please give one to yourself? Every home, every single home should have their own new Plaut Chumash, and give a second one to Ari as an expression of gratitude for the course I have given. We need to build up enough Plaut Chumashim so the whole congregation can use it when we're together. So thank you for attending. You honor me with your presence. Let's begin.
What is Plaut Humashim?
Very good question. There it is. There it is. Sergio has it. It's a brand new Portuguese translation of the classic North American. There it is. It is the first Reform Torah commentary. You get the Hebrew, you get a new Portuguese translation of the Hebrew, and a commentary, an explanation verse by verse of the Torah.
Okay.
All of this was initiated by Rabbi Gunther Plaut Oliver Sholem, who was a German refugee, just like our founding Rabbi Henrique Lemle. Plaut came as a student in 1939 with a group of 5 other German rabbinic students. So our own Raoul Gottlieb was the one who initiated this project. We're profoundly grateful. Thank you, Carla. Everyone sees. So Ari has, please purchase for yourselves, purchase a second one and give as a gift to Ari for our use. Okay.
All
King
right.
David. King David is mentioned more than anyone else in the Hebrew Bible. Mentioned more. He is universally famous. If you've been to Florence, you've seen the exquisite statue that Michelangelo did of David as a youth. He became famous because he killed Goliath with a stone right between the eyes. And that made him a warrior who would become a king. He unseated the first king of Israel, King Saul, and became the king for whom the dynasty of King David will go all the way to the end of time, and the Messiah will come from the dynasty of King David. So he's not just famous in the Bible. You might know, maybe you have learned it when you were children. Maybe you've seen your children or grandchildren learning it. David, Melech Israel, Chai, Chai, Vic. Okay. I won't sing in front of our chazanit. That's a cruel thing. So there's a song that all our children learn, and he is called David HaMelech. But he is also the author of all Psalms, all 150 Psalms. He didn't really write all of them, but the rabbis give him the kavod of having been the author of the Psalms. What could he be missing? What he could be missing is he asked God if he could build the temple, and God said no. And he was persistent. He didn't ask once or twice, but 3 times. In 3 different places in the Tanakh, God says no. Your son Solomon will build the temple. So if he's so great, he doesn't get to build the temple, just like Moses does not get to go into the land. He has blood on his hands. And traditionally, it was argued he has blood on his hands because of the wars he fought. In my book, I suggest, and I'm not the first to suggest this, it isn't the wars he fought. It is in his personal life, the murder he created. Second Samuel, chapter 11 and 12, chapter 11 begins. And it was the time of year when the wars were going on, but David was home. Okay? No longer a warrior, he had someone else to fight. And he's on his roof. And while he's on his roof, he sees a magnificent woman bathing. And the next thing you know, he wants her. but he finds out that she's married. She's the daughter of someone David knows, and she's married to one of his generals, Uriah. But the text is very clear. He fetches her. He has her brought to him. And he lays with her. And there's a little phrase, she had just finished her menstrual cycle. She was very ready to get pregnant. And she gets pregnant. And the king brings her husband home from battle and attempts to create a fraud whereby Uriah will go and be with his wife as was permitted, so that the pregnancy will look conjugal. Uriah turns out to be a very ethical person. No reason for me to go home if my men can't go home. Not once, but twice. David writes a letter to have Uriah put in the front of the battle line, gives Uriah the letter to give the general. It's right out of The Sopranos. There is no contemporary script that I could imagine that's as diabolical. The king of Israel has an affair with a married woman, gets her pregnant, and then has her husband killed. It's in the text, not making it up. Uriah dies after an appropriate time. Bathsheba is brought to David and they marry. No one will be surprised. The child dies before 7 days. This is the only unnamed child whose birth is given, no name. And David is absolutely beside himself in grief. He is warned by the prophet Nathan about what he has done. He gets Torah in the straightest possible way. In a magnificent parable, Nathan says to him, there is the wealthiest man in all of the country. He has everything, but he steals a poor man's lamb to serve at a banquet. David becomes outraged. Nathan says, you are that man. And David now knows what he's done. The rabbinic tradition says that Psalm 51 is King David's contrition, tshuva. Okay, it's a beautiful psalm, Psalm 51. They have a child. That child is Solomon, the wisest of all of Israel's kings, and Solomon will build the Holy Temple. So there you have the story. 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12. It's all there. I've not made up a single thing. And when David says, let me build your holy temple, I am the king who should build you a palace of worship. Nope. Blood on your hands. This is a story about power, about the abuse of power, And those of us who live in a Me Too age, those of us who understand how people at every single level of our world, industry, media, government, there is a past president of the state of Israel who was indicted and incarcerated for rape. I worked for a president of the United States who was impeached, though not convicted. This is not a new story. So here's the question. What am I missing? Why is David still included in the Bible? Not only why is he included, why is he the source of the Messiah? Why is David Melech Yisrael where we begin? I believe the rabbis are teaching us a profound lesson. And it prompted me to go back and look at Abraham and Moses, and then finally write this book. Imperfection is the norm, not the exception of the norm. And the greatest, the most powerful, the most spiritually valuable are included in the imperfect. There's a Talmudic expression, alachat kama v'chama, how much the more so. Can you imagine if David, who does this, and the text is clear, he's walking on his roof, he sees a beautiful naked woman, he wants her. Parenthesis, he had a harem. He could have anyone he wanted. She was someone's daughter and someone's wife. And in the Bible, you cannot have anyone's wife. It's a polygamous society. But a woman who is married is off limits. He takes her anyway. Power that knows no limits cannot ever include God.
Yeah.
Those who have power and do not understand the limit of the power they have already given up understanding God. But the rabbis include David to teach all of us the resilience of imperfection. None of us have it all, do it all, are always just so. Even the great Messianic dynasty begins with someone who abused power. We see it all around us today. We see it everywhere politically. We have lost a construct of leader everywhere. Israel, North America, Brazil, Hungary. Johnson was pushed out as prime minister. Point to a place in the world that has a leader that understands the burden and responsibility of power. And the rabbis understood this already in the first century. My theory is that when Jesus of Nazareth left the tomb after the third day and rose, becoming the Christ, the risen Messiah, the rabbis understood that they would have a new and different religious competitor. And in the first century, the rabbis went out of their way to make sure that David, the source of the line from which Jesus comes, David would be as imperfect as possible. On his one side of the family comes from Moab, one of the 7 nations we are not supposed to intermarry with. After Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot, his wife now dead, his daughters afraid that the world as we knew it had been destroyed. His daughters took their father up to the mountains. Fearing there were no other people, they got him drunk and incestuously got pregnant with their father.
Wow.
The first child born of drunken incest is Moab. Who comes from Moab? Ruth, the great-grandmother of King David. Oh, by the way, we have a Megillah in the Tanakh named for Ruth. We read on Shavuot. This is chapter 19 of Genesis. I didn't make it up. Genesis 38. Judah has 3 sons. The first one marries Tamar. He dies. According to biblical law, she must marry his brother. That is called a levirate marriage. So the issue stays inside the family. The second son, Judah's second son, is Onan. He did not want to waste his seed. So he spilt it. He masturbated. He dies too. Now Tamar cannot remarry. The text says Judah becomes a widower. He goes down to the sheep shearing festival, and unknowns to him, Tamar dresses up as a kideshah, a prostitute. Fooling her father-in-law, he impregnates her. He later apologizes when he realizes what he has done. She has twins. The eldest of the twins is Perez, from whom Boaz comes, who will marry Ruth.
A bunch of people in the biblical history have twins, don't they?
Yes, yes, yes. Now, no particular significance. No particular significance. So Perez marries Ruth, and those elements of Genesis, unnecessary to the narrative, I believe were added to make sure King David was even more imperfect. More imperfect as early Christianity went out and said, look, we have David's Messiah, David's risen one. The rabbis make a decision to keep David just where he is. They are teaching us in the most profound way. Imperfection in ways none of us would ever behave. Imperfection is included at the highest level of Jewish life. Imperfection is the norm, not perfection. Think about it. The Messiah, the best, the most perfect tikkun olam, but it comes from a line that is so imperfect. The rabbis understood human nature. We're halfway through Elul. We're getting ready for, metaphorically, Sefer Chaim V'Mavet, the book of life and death, to be opened. There are moments during the Yomim Noraim where we only look at ourselves. And what we see, if we are honest with ourselves, is an imperfect but still trying, still striving, still caring human being. I give you David and ask you at some point during the High Holy Days, compare yourself to David. No matter how bad you think you are, nobody is as bad as King David. And yet, David is King David. There was a chance to change the text. They sat in a room and they decided, no, these are the texts we're going to keep. So we read them in 2022. I listen to people constantly complain about everyone. I don't like anyone either. The rabbis understood that complaining about what we think others do means very little if we ourselves don't measure who we are. We all have an opinion about who should be what president where. I don't have an opinion about Brazil. I do about the United States and Israel. But even that would get into an argument on the screen. I don't want to start an argument. But can you imagine arguing over King David? He remained the king until he died. And he wasn't excluded from the tradition. Who could want King David? You want me to teach this to your children and grandchildren? And yet, if you read the Bible seriously, it's all there. Why is it there? Resilience in the imperfection of being human. We continue to come back and strive. Rosh Hashaná, the book is opened. Book is closed at Ne'ilah on Yom Kipur. 10 days. None of us can measure up to the image we have of what we think others want us to be. So measure yourself by King David. None of you are teenage warriors. None of you can play the lyre, the harp, write psalms, lead a battle, create more land and people and wealth. And none of you also will take a woman who's someone else's wife, impregnate her, and kill her husband. And yet, King David remains. The lesson is not, look what you can get away with. The lesson is, we need to measure ourselves beginning with imperfection. None of us are perfect. Stop striving to be what you cannot be. Be whole. Be honest. That's why Nathan was so powerful. So powerful. Queen Esther, a book that does not include God. The word, the name does not appear. 2 books in the Bible, that and Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs. Both ancient Persian. Esther is a folk tale. Has nothing to do with anything else we've ever seen in the Bible. Very strange. The opening scene is disgusting. Vashti, the queen, is asked to dance naked in front of a big banquet that the king is having. She's disgusted. She won't come. Okay. He does away with her. Gets a new queen, Esther. We want Esther to marry a non-Jewish king so that ultimately she can save the Jewish people in a made-up place called Shushan. Why is this book, Megillah scroll, kept inside the Hebrew Bible? Well, I'd love to have been in the room in the year 90 when that decision was made. Lots of arguments. Did the Megillah come before Purim? Did Purim require the Megillah? I write about it. I suggest it has to do with the calendar. The person who controls the calendar controls the community. There was nothing announcing Pesach. Purim is 1 month before Pesach. You need to remind the people, get ready. I am more concerned about the villain, not Esther, not her uncle. Who is the villain? Haman. Haman is a descendant of Amalek, the worst possible evil in all of Torah. And you go, no, Rabbi, that's not possible. Surely Pharaoh is the most evil. You would think. But Amalek, who appears in Exodus 17 as having attacked the Israelites in the wilderness and attacked from behind, attacked the stragglers, the weakest. We don't know a lot about Amalek. He's a descendant of Esau, one of Esau's children who marries Timnah. Know nothing. But in Deuteronomy 25, verses 17 to 19, an absolutely fascinating 3 lines, Zachor et Amalek. Remember what Amalek did when you were in the desert. And it ends with Lo tishkach. Don't forget. Begins with remember, ends with don't forget. We read that as a second Torah portion, the Shabbat before Purim. It's called Shabbat Zachor. Oh, come on. Purim is not enough. We need a Shabbat named for Amalek. Why is there not a Shabbat named for Yitzro? Why is there not a Shabbat named for Aharon? But we get Zachor. Remember what Amalek did. And so, fear, as I write in my book, the book of Esther is about fear. The people were afraid. Esther helps them overcome their fear. She had hidden her identity, then comes out. In a completely secular book, Mordecai, her uncle, tells her what to do. She uses her beauty, 2 banquets. She toys with Haman. Finally, the king finds out who is truly evil. And the last 2 chapters, the Jews in Shushan kill everyone. It's an act of so much violence that in a traditional shul, you're supposed to read the last 2 chapters so quick that no one can understand. Do we need to be afraid? Did the rabbis include Esther to warn us? This is the first diaspora book in the entire Bible, written about a diaspora community, written for something that will be done in the diaspora. How many of us are afraid? Many would speak of the problems in Brazil, the violence on the street, the fear that has led many young adults to make Aliyah, go to Canada, go to the US. Are we afraid of being Jews today? I'm teaching a new course in anti-Semitism at my former university. I did a video conversation with a young man whose mother I helped become a Jew and then did his parents' wedding. He was playing baseball, and boys in Wisconsin and Minnesota harassed him as a Jew while he played baseball. The data on anti-Semitism is higher than at any point since the late 1930s. But it's a Megillah in which we are supposed to be joyous. But
it's not a reality. It's not a reality here in Brazil. We don't have it here, thank God.
We have other fear, Marcella.
No, but there's
Not
about
just-
Jews that we don't have it, thank God. We don't
Okay.
have that.
It is fear today.
Sorry, I have to disagree with you. We do, and we have it a lot.
Really, I
Wow.
never saw it, never felt this.
I felt it, and
disagree
I'm
too.
sure
All right,
other
wait.
people
Give
felt
me
it.
a few
also
more
disagree.
minutes. Give
Okay.
me a few more minutes. The disagreement is what I'm provoking, but give me a few more minutes to finish, please. Look, around the world today, there is more homelessness, more famine, more absolute illiteracy. A small percentage of people in the global population own and control the majority of money and income. People are afraid of much more then racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, LGBTQ. There are lots of divisions in the human community for which people are afraid. We've spent 2.5 years having fear about a virus change the way we live. People are still getting sick, and people are still dying. That fear has had a permanent impact on education, on the children who were out of school, on the children going back to school. Yes, we are people caught up in cycles of fear, which is why Esther has a great deal to teach us about being without God. If you're afraid, you are unaware that you are not alone. If you are caught up in fear and then revenge, you are unaware of the community in which you could and are participating. Esther is one of the few books in the Bible that uses the word Jew. It's mentioned also in Daniel, but it is not a common word because the Hebrew Bible is about the Israelites. The Jews are people outside the Bible. Zionism began 125 years ago in the First World Zionist Congress. That was initiated by fear after the Dreyfus Affair, when Theodor Herzl wrote a book, Der Judenstaat, that the Enlightenment would ultimately deny us full acceptance. There are arguments about whether or not there should be an agreement with Iran, who simply only wants to destroy us. How many different lists can I offer you about the things we can and are afraid of? Fear paralyzes, isolates, and keeps people from not engaging in relationships. There was an Israeli settler from America who used Esther's story to justify the murder of 19 at the Machpelah, saying these are Amalekites. His grave today is a sacred place for, in my opinion, dangerous messianic settlers. I am afraid of that kind of Zionism. I am afraid of the Kahanas who might be included in a new Bibi government. I'm afraid of them. It's not that I disagree. I am afraid of them. What does that fear do? It stops me from engaging in political discourse. I don't want to anger people. Anyone who would include Ben Gvir and Skochevich in their government are, in my opinion, dangerous for the Jewish people. And that includes Benjamin Netanyahu. But our first session began with, let's not be political. For the Jewish people, we started Israel because we were afraid 40 years before the Nazis. And we had reason to be afraid. The rabbis decide that the book of Esther is a warning for the diaspora community. If you cannot find hope in the midst even of the Hamans with whom you live, you will not engage in the community building. Do you want a Jewish community that is always looking for revenge? Afraid, let's destroy what we fear. That's what happened at the Machpelah. They're Amalekites. I don't want to live with them. I will shoot them all. Esther is included in the Bible, a book that does not include God. As a warning, you liked what Esther was able to do with Mordecai. How often do you read chapter 9 and 10? Are you proud of chapter 9 and 10? Just as proud as you are of what Queen Esther does at the banquet? The Hebrew Bible is an extraordinary text about the complex reality of human nature. All the people I write about are just like all of us. We abuse power. We don't understand power. We too can be isolated by fear. And we go back and we read and wonder, why would Esther finally understand what her uncle meant? If it doesn't come from you, if what you need to do, if you remain silent, it will come from someone else. So here we are, halfway through Elul. And we're asking the same questions that the rabbis asked when they included King David and Queen Esther. Two characters, fully developed. Would you include a Queen Esther if you were doing the Bible? Would you include a Haman who comes from an Amalek? And you want the people to remember always what Amalek did and blot out his memory. Don't forget. We have an eternal light and an eternal enemy. Am I still afraid of Amalek? Am I still angry at Amalek? Who always needs an enemy? Hope, not a hope that is empty, but a hope that is generated from relationships, a resilience. The Israeli national anthem is called Hatikva. I know of no other country that could have created a national anthem made up of refugees from death camps that would sing Hatikva. Hope, not in what I have realized, hope in what I with others will realize. Perfect means to finish something. Perfect doesn't mean without flaws. To perfect something means to finish it, to complete it. At the end of Yom Kippur, we are finished with this cycle of self-reflection. What did I learn about myself that I did not know last year when I was doing this? What can I now understand about myself to begin another year? I don't like new year. Another year. New means that what's finished is old. And in the presence of just a couple of people who are older than I am, Paolo and Janetti, you respect the old for their wisdom. You don't say, hi, I have something new. So it's another year, 5783. And we will keep 5782. It's not old. We're not putting it away. We're completing it. I want to hope, not run away with fear. And this year, there is more to frighten us than the years during the pandemic. More anger, more division, and inside the anger and division, more certainty. So, I don't leave you. I encourage you to engage profoundly in the last 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, in opportunities to look at the 6 characters I give you, understanding that each is limited, each imperfect, and we are in each of them. David, in a way far beyond my scope, had everything and gave it away because of his power. In ways that are so similar to the world in which we live. And Esther, the right kind of leader at the right moment, who did not seek the power she had, but because her uncle helped her understand, she drew the community together and they overcame the fear. A different people, Haman said. You have a different people living in your country. They do different things. We do different things. And thank God, the nature of the anti-Semitism we face everywhere in the world. We are aware of it. We are teaching about it. I helped the young baseball player fill out a report with the ADL. That report will go to the Summer League of Baseball. 21-year-old, not telling on others, but making a commitment that the league must understand that behavior is not appropriate. We cannot be afraid. We cannot seek vengeance, but we must say on our own behalf, that is not acceptable. In our schools, where we work, in our neighborhoods. This is 2022. It is nearly 80 years now after we watch people in silence. We will not allow fear to silence us. So it's 8:30. I'm sure I've provoked, angered. We have people who want to talk about lots of issues. Let us now open this to questions about the book, about David, about Esther, about the values I'm leaving with you for the holy days.
I just want to tell you, Joseph, this was just amazing. Blown out. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank
You're
you.
very welcome. I can't daven the way you daven, so I'll do what I do well. Mwah. So Marcella and Carla were disagreeing about
Oh,
the
yes.
issue.
Let me explain why. I don't know where comes anti-Semitism here, because from my part, I always listen. For example, my mother, every time she goes look for a doctor, and since I was very young, my doctor was Milton Gerovics, and every time she changes, has to be someone with a Jewish last name, because she thinks the Jews are very intelligent, very smart, very bright, very this and that. So it's always a compliment that I hear about Jews, that they are very intelligent, very bright, they accomplish great things, etc., brilliant minds, etc., etc., etc. So pretty much everywhere I go, this is what I hear about them. So they are in great corporations, big corporations, they achieve great things, they are very united, they're a great force, they manage to get what they want, etc., etc., etc. And about their anyway, so I always hear good things about them. I never hear bad things about them. From my family and for other people, because I grew up with many Jews too. So I don't know, I never had that because I grew up with them being my friends, and I never experienced anybody being accused of anything, of being prejudiced of anything. We were kind of mixed. So I never felt that here. So I don't know where it comes from, but if someone experienced, I'm very sorry. I never, in my life, I'm 47, I never felt that.
Well, look, I'm glad you didn't. There are many on the screen who could share their own personal experience, which is the other ways. I have not personally, in the time I've lived in Brazil, experienced it, but I have helped people who've brought me their experience. So I know it does exist here. It is something, as a Jewish parent and grandparent, I can tell you, when your child experiences it for the first time and you try to comfort and help them, then you understand the legacy of the Jewish people. It is not, in my opinion, something for which the community must fear its existence. However, neither should we ignore the data, the actual examples statistically of anti-Semitism. So Janechi, then Carla.
First, I think it's very nice of Marcela's family that they admire Jews and they don't hate them for it. But it's often exactly the admiration for Jews that makes people hate the Jews. It sometimes goes hand in hand, one way and the other. And personally, I have to say that a very long time in my life, I did not believe there was anti-Semitism. I never felt it. But but from my friends that I always had, friends that were not Jewish, I heard too often, all you need is not being Jewish to know that there is anti-Semitism. And I heard this from several different people that did not know each other, non-Jews. And then when I was 50 years old, I finally went to the university and I studied history. And this was my worst experience in anti-Semitism in Rio, was exactly at the university, where people should know better, let's say. And I studied history, and it was full of anti-Semitic teachers. And I want to say that you're talking about fear, that I spent the whole time of my life, even when I did not know about anti-Semitism, when I was very young, I was always exposed to lots of non-Jews and non-Jewish school and everything. All my life, I've tried to explain what is Judaism, what are the Jews. In school, at the dialogue, fighting with the teachers which were my age or younger, etc., etc. I think that's the answer to not be, you have to be fearless. That's what I just wanted to comment.
Thank you, Janetti. Carla.
Thank you, Janetti. That was lovely. What I wanted to say is that you don't need, I'm not gonna tell you guys about my experiences with anti-Semitism. But what I want to tell you is that I don't need to know there's poverty because I've never suffered from poverty. I don't need to know there is racism because I've never suffered from racism. I don't need to know people starve because Baruch Hashem, I've never starved. I think so many times, and that's so important, especially for us Jews, and of course, for all humanity, we need to be aware of what's going on around us. It's not just because I don't feel cold, I don't fear, I don't starve. It doesn't mean that this doesn't exist in the world. And this is so important because as human beings, we can get, how can I say, so self-absorbed that, and it's a natural thing. It's a natural thing that we think about our things, our lives, and sometimes we forget to look at the other direction. And this is so important. And we talked about this on our first lesson. Unfortunately, last week I was not able to come. But I think more importantly than telling, and I think all of us can say and can tell a time that they were disrespectful as Jews. But we need to be aware, and we need to read, and we need to be informed. That's my opinion. And that this, for me, is more important than tell you guys how many times I was disrespected as a Jew, because it speaks for all of us. That's my opinion. Thank you,
Carla. So we learn, and the Jewish community itself has to cope with, where are the emphasis? Do we tell people, and Janetti has led interfaith dialogue at Ari for decades. Do we tell people the best? Always come and watch us celebrate. Come and share our prayers. Come and share our scripture. Or do we also say, by the way, when you stand up for the New Testament, but sit down for the Old Testament, you understand that's anti-Semitic. When you call my Bible the Old Testament, not Hebrew scripture, do you understand that's anti-Semitic, disrespectful? There remains an important debate. How do you represent yourself? Based on how the disrespect makes you afraid and angry? Or do we engage people on the shared blessings we all have in a 21st century democratic country? It's not one or the other, it's always both. Always both. More questions about David, about Esther, things you were unaware of. Ah, Hivi, Maringaz on the screen.
Yes. Joseph, you said David had teach us the imperfection.
Yes.
We learn about imperfection. And the Mashiach came from David
Correct.
dynasty. Then with the Mashiach, we also have imperfection.
Wonderful.
Imperfection.
Yes. So you
And,
see the irony that the Messianic age, that for which we are working Tikkun Olam, is not an age of perfection, but an age in which we can overcome perfectionism.
Yes, I thought about that because we have more responsibility with the Messianic era because have the imperfection. Imperfection is it's something from our essence. Then we have more responsibility about the Messianic era. And normally we can listen about the people that say that Messianic era is something from outside to inside. And now I think that it's something from inside to outside. It's the opposite.
Very good, Hivi. Look, the Messianic age, according to most Jewish commentators, will come when the world as we know it ends. None of us will be here for it. So we can all argue about what it will be like, and none of us will be wrong, because none of us will be here to imagine it. So just because God created the world out of nothing, the rabbis need for God to end the world at a time. And that time will be the Messianic time, a time beyond time. Victor.
Okay.
Yes, Rabbi Joseph, I really regret that I didn't attend the last two sections. I really regret. And,
well, Alessandra can send you the recordings.
Very good, very good. Now, what I learned and I get reinforced is the idea that you can be on the worst position. You can be the worst person. You can judge yourself. You're the worst person, but and you can be in the worst position. And if you have the real intention, the real teshuva of changing yourself, you have the chance. So that's why I think the Bible can be really read on the jail. People are prisoners, people in the worst situations, they can really have the hope. That I really get this figure very clear, and this is very powerful and very and gives really hope to you can change yourself on even if you really in a bad way.
but it requires intentional contrition. You must, and there's an argument, does it have to be public? You have to say it out loud. You have to show remorse. You must really be sorry. David does show sorrow. He is truly horrified that he has to bury this infant that dies without a name. And that is the sorrow out of which Psalm 51 comes. So you're right, Victor. Judaism teaches nothing is without the possibility of repentance, not without the possibility of changing who you are. Judaism does not begin with original sin. Judaism begins with, we are all human and ultimately in charge of the choices we make. That's why on Rosh Hashaná, when the book opens, we then have 10 days to spend the time doing the work we need to do. So you're correct. But I must emphasize, tshuva takes time and intention. You must go to the person against whom you have sinned. There is a absolutely wonderful story that Abraham Joshua Heschel used to give when people would ask him, do you forgive the Germans? And he would tell the story of Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, who wanted to visit, maybe I told you this story, wanted to visit someone who was sick. He got on the train, went to visit the sick person, but he dressed as a beggar. Dressed as a beggar so no one would bother him. Visited the friend, Motzei Shabbat, gets back on the train to go back to Kotsk, dressed as a beggar. Two young ruffians, obnoxious teenagers, get on the train car and spit on him, make fun of him, mock him. The train then pulls into Kotsk. The Rebbe gets off, and there are all his Hasidim. Takes off the clothes of the beggar, puts on a big fur shtreimel, his black silk coat. Rebbe, we didn't know who you were. Forgive us. Oh my God, look what we've done. The two boys, two young men, become part of his community, begging him for forgiveness. He won't recognize them. Yom Kippur, they sit at his feet in sackcloth, crying, begging, Rebbe, please forgive us. Just before Ne'ilah, the Rebbe looks at the boys. You spit on and mocked and made fun of a poor old beggar. You're asking the Kotzke Rebbe for forgiveness. Go find the poor old beggar. And Heschel would tell this story and say, Germans are asking me to forgive them. They didn't do this to Abraham Joshua Heschel. Have them go ask my mother and two sisters who died in the Warsaw Ghetto. So, look, nothing falls from the heavens because of our prayers. You want change? Go out and do it. You want to make tshuva, Victor? You and you alone are responsible for that. But it begins with recognizing what you did, which is why Nathan tells that story to King David. Why Mordecai ultimately pushes Esther out in front beyond her fear.
Thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome. Well, my friends, we have 10 minutes left. You fill my heart with joy that the reason I wrote this book, that it would bring more questions, more ideas, more conversations. How grateful I am that Paulo Geiger, who so brilliantly and graciously did the translation, made my English book accessible in Brazil. How grateful I am that this was done in a way to honor my 75th birthday. And my joy is that you will share the book with others. Share the book with others in order to create more conversations and more ideas. The world in which we live have far too many King Davids. They have not made tshuva. They have power and use it without any shame. We have too much too much fear. And I believe that the fear we're experiencing will increase, not decrease, in the days and weeks ahead. So I pray that the sweetness of the new year as a double portion for all of you. I look forward, I hope, to seeing you at Ari and in other congregations. And I will offer to teach another course for Ari, so we can meet again. I'm always available. Alessandra knows my contact information. If you have questions that you were unable or felt uncomfortable asking in this setting, I will most certainly answer them in other settings. Alessandra, thank you, thank you, thank you. Without the technology, none of this works, as I'm learning more every day.
You're welcome.
And I thank all of you for the time in your busy lives, and pray that Elul ends with more questions. Go into the new year, another year, with more questions. Beijo.
Rabbi Joseph, thank you very much for the lessons. We learned a lot and we are still learning every day. It's more sapiens of your book.
You are very, very welcome. And thank you for all those who wrote so many very kind things in the chat. I am grateful for your graciousness and hope that our paths will not converge with fear, but converge in relationships of hope. Let that be the way 5783 begins.
Yes.
Tchau, pessoal. Obrigada.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Joseph, thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Obrigado.
Bye-bye.
Toda rabá,
Thanks.
Joseph.
Vakasha, vakasha.
Thank
you, Joseph.
You're
Thanks.
very
Thank you.
welcome.
Bye.
Joseph. Very
Thank you.
nice.
Bye-bye.
Very good.